Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the MC65 FM podcast. Today, we explore technologies, digital transformation, AI, business application, and the people driving innovation across the Microsoft ecosystem. Today's episode is going to be especially value for any involved in the ERP modernization, finance transformation, Dynamics 365, or enterprise technology. I'm joined by Alicia King, pre-sales engineer director at RSM US LLP, Microsoft MVP speaker and podcast host. Also, Alicia works closely with CFOs and CIOs, helping organizations reduce disruption, control cost, and successfully modernize and consolidate ERP systems using Microsoft Dynamics 365 finance and supply chain. She has supported more than 100 Microsoft ERP transitions across more than 40 countries and bringing a unique perspective to the combination finance, technology, executive strategy, and real world implementation experience. Alicia, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Can you, for the people who don't know you, can you a little bit tell us about your background and how you fit into the Microsoft ecosystem?
Absolutely. So, my name is Alicia King. I live in Greenville, South Carolina, in the United States. I've been in the Microsoft space since 2009. And my journey through the Microsoft channel has been an amazing journey. It's one of those things where you start out, you really don't know what you're getting into, right? When you first start out, and you start meeting people and having experiences. And I have to say that the Microsoft community is so welcoming and friendly. You can go up to anybody and pretty much ask any question, and you're going to get some honest feedback. And so I started my journey in supply chain years ago. And then when I started doing Microsoft in 2009, I started doing finance. So being able having that supply chain background and marrying it with finance has proved to be really, really powerful in my implementations as well as in my sales demos that I'm currently doing. And then about 3 years ago, I became a Microsoft MVP, and that opened up a whole new world to me, a different circle, and put me in a level of influence. And so for that, I'm certainly grateful. And it's really opened up a lot of thought leadership and given me a platform to blog and podcast and to go to speaking events.
Awesome. That's really cool. Um, what will you say when we look a little bit about in your career? You have done 100 transitions. So what? This is so much. So, is there anything you have learned through these projects where you say this was really amazing for me?
One of the things that I've learned is that we're not in a technology business, we're in the people business. Whenever
Mm,
you go into a company, you start learning their people and their culture. And it's so important to understand who they want to become as a company. So that way, you, as an implementer or as a thought leader inside of that company, can start to and help them get to where they're going to go. It's not about going in and showing them how smart you are. It's going in and showing them how you can help transform them and get them to where they want to go so they can serve their customers better. And I've had the privilege of working in about 14 different countries. So my platform and my experience is across this ecosystem of international type companies, so in industrials, life sciences, service industries. And across those different platforms, you start to see a common thread. And it's really about how people want to view their business. So, anytime you go into a project or you start talking to a potential client, you always want to say, who is my audience and what's my business objective? And then when you get in alignment with that, you help create clarity. Once you have clarity about what you're going to do with a client and where they're going to go, that's where the magic happens because now you're working in a state of flow and there's a lot of trust between you and the client. And that's really where you start getting that momentum and you start seeing a huge value add.
mm, awesome. A little bit about Dynamics 365 financial supply chain. Sorry. Um, how have this over the years evolved from your perspective, and especially now we have Copilot and AI? Is there big changes? What did you see?
D365 has always been a relational database, but it's not always been easy to get data out of D365. So back when I started, I was in a product called AX 2009, and then 2000 AX 2009 became AX 2012, and then AX 2012 became D365 Finance and Supply Chain. So through the years, the systems became easier to get the information out of. But not just that, Microsoft's platform for meeting their customers' needs is to go and buy ISVs or integrated software vendors applications and bring it into the core application of D365. So when I started out in 2009, people went out and bought best of breed software and then integrated them together. So for example, they may go out and get AX 2009 for finance and maybe manufacturing, but they would go out to have some other third party system for like AP automation. And then they would integrate that in, or warehouse management back in the day, and integrate
Mhm.
that with Microsoft. And then Microsoft then in AX 2012 went out and bought a warehouse management system and made that part of the core application. So then you no longer had to go out and buy a warehouse management system. It was part of the core application. Then in D365 finance and supply chain, you've seen that with credit collections. And again, with warehouse management, some of the other features, they've gone out in asset management, for example, they went out and bought these different solutions and made it part of the core product. So now when people go buy the product, they're no longer looking to say, hey, what's the best of breed? They're looking to say what holistic system best fits what holistic system best fits my business requirement. So now D365 is kind of that one stop shop where you can get really fantastic financials, manufacturing, asset management, lease management, project management, all of those different components inside of one ecosystem. There are still some times where you do need to go out and get a best of breed to integrate in, but largely D365 is really that holistic system. So everyone is working off the same database, working off the same system from business to business and processes.
Mhm. Interesting. That's really really cool. You work directly with a lot of CFOs, CIOs. What are the biggest mistakes organizations make when they approach an ERP modernization?
Most companies, when they come to us, they've already done their homework. They're no longer trying to say, what is D365 or who are you as an organization? They've already done their homework and found out what D365 finance and supply chain is, the functionality inside of it. They already knew who I am. Usually, when I get to the door, they've already looked at my LinkedIn profile. They already know what company we are. So I work for RSM, and they've done that homework. So when you walk in the door, you're no longer air quote introducing yourself. You're really validating what they already know to be true. So when you walk in the door, it's no longer saying Microsoft's this great product, RSM's this great company, I have all this experience. They're really wanting you to make sure that you're in alignment with what they already believe to be true about you. And it's really about mitigating risk, because used to it was a CIO and the CFO that were the decision makers, but now you have buying committees. So it's
Mm,
no longer resting on one person to make the decision.
yeah, I understand. I think a little bit. We have this, this executive alignment. How important is this before the project starts?
Alignment is key, because alignment shows clarity. Whenever you go into a company, they're not looking for guarantees. They're looking to make sure that there's clarity around what you're going to deliver. And when you run into difficulties, how are you going to manage those difficulties? Because everybody knows ERP implementations are hard and they're long, because it's literally like heart surgery, right? You're going in and you're removing or replacing this core element of the business, because ERP literally runs the business. So you have to go in very strategically to replace the ERP system that they're currently on and putting in the new one to make sure that you can still deliver product to your customers on time. You don't have negative impact on cash flow, that your inventory levels stay where they're supposed to be. All those pieces are very, very important. And so going into this, they want to know like, hey, when we do run into a problem, how are you going to manage it? How are we going to share this risk together and communicate and mitigate risk?
And that's I think the topic is here, organizational change. How how what impact have a modernized or modernizing ERP on the organizations, and how can they handle the change? Yeah, especially in the company, to their employees or to their to their processes.
Change management is key. We can go in and do an amazing implementation, have all the bells and whistles working, everything tested. But if the users don't adopt the change, it will fail. So if you were to go out right now and do a search and say how many ERP implementations are deemed successful, you will see that only 50% of ERP implementations are deemed successful. And that's across all applications. It's not just Microsoft, it's all of them collectively. So you have to step back and ask yourself why. And the reason why most of the time that is true is because there has not been good change management inside of the organization. And as a result, the users have not adopted the change. So, one of the things that is key in doing that is one is leadership has to make sure that the users feel safe. And the reason that's so important is if I've been doing my job on a green screen, say an AS400 type application for the past 30 years, and now all of a sudden you're handing me this software as a solution, Windows based or internet based application,
Mm,
that's scary
mm,
because I'm going to ask myself, one, can I do it? If I can do it, how am I going to do my job?
mm,
Someone has literally shifted my world. So, in many cases, it's easier for people to get defensive and talk about how the system won't work for them instead of how the system will work for them. And
mm,
until they actually start using the language of how the system will work for them, you're going to get that resistance. If you're getting resistance, you're not going to get adoption. So I would say if for the folks listening to this podcast, if you're in a leadership position, make sure that your users feel valued and they feel safe and they have the confirmation that they can do it, that they can own the system and they can be successful. So there's one component of it. The other component of it is during the training and during the implementation process. One of the beautiful things about D365 Finance and Supply Chain is the fact that you can personalize your screens. Whenever you
mhm,
go in and look at the core application, it can be so overwhelming because it is huge. It's a huge application. There's so many different modules and so many different workspaces and thousands of fields on the screen, right? So, from an implementation perspective, go in and find out how that individual needs to use a system. Then
mm,
hide everything they don't need to see. Move things around so that their tabs are in a certain order. Do things to make their day to day life easy.
mm,
Once you make something easy, people start to believe that they can do it. And once they believe that they can do it, they will adopt. And then
mm.
that's how you get success and adoption during an ERP implementation.
I see often in my space, Microsoft Fabric, a lot of companies say, "Oh, we need this technology. IT does it for us." But for my feeling, it's they don't do business process redesign. How can look up, yeah, this business this process redesign in that in Dynamics or in ERP systems?
You always have to say, what is my business objective? So let's say, for example, I was working with a company and we were looking at the chart of accounts, just as an example, and financial dimensions. The first thing I would start asking is, how do you want to see your reports? You always start with the end in mind. And you say, how do you want to run your business? Do you want to be able to see region in your trial balance? So now all of a sudden, if I can say for this particular region, this was my cost of goods sold and this was my revenue, now all of a sudden I can measure profit margins by region. If I want to say maybe it's by product group, that way you can figure out which product group is making you the most profit. Because in every business, you have money makers and money takers. So you have to figure out which products are going to give you the biggest profit margins, but you can't do that if you don't configure the system right. If you don't configure the system with certain financial dimensions or certain fields being populated. But if you set the system up in a certain way, now all of a sudden everything's easy. So it's always starting with the end in mind and working backwards into the configuration of the system. that's how you're going to get the information that you're looking for.
I think another topic what's especially important is data quality in ERP success. What experience have you collected in the years you working with ERP and companies about especially about data quality?
It's funny. I've worked on so many different projects, and most of them do costing because a lot of the projects I've worked on have been in manufacturing. And it's so interesting to me at how many times people put costing off to the end. They're like, "Oh, it's just costing." And I'm like, "Do you hear yourself? You're saying it's just costing. Do you realize if your cost is wrong, your profit margins are wrong, if your project profit margins are wrong, you don't know how much money you're making." It is so, so, so important. So it's one of those things that if your data is wrong, you're going to run your business wrong. If you go in and you're setting up your customers and you don't pay attention to the addresses that are being brought into the system, guess what? The wrong address is going to get put on the sales order, or the person putting in the sales order isn't going to know what address to pick. The customer has to own the data. That doesn't mean the partner can't help you transform the data into D365, but it is so, so critical that you go through different iterations of that data migration to make sure your data is clean. Because I can tell you from experience, if your data is dirty and you go live, it is so much harder to fix. It
Mm,
is well worth the time to go through that process during your user acceptance testing, during your mock go lives. Make sure your data is clean. Then you're going to have to set yourself up for a high level of success at go live. But again, if your data is dirty, you're going to suffer.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's true. A lot of company, yeah, a little bit wrong. But um, when you see that this projects, did you think companies become more realistic about timelines and expectations actually, or
One of the
yeah?
things that I've seen is a lot of companies don't provide enough resources on their side. So they'll
Mm,
look at the finance team or the supply chain team, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, you can do this on top of your existing job." Well, guess what? These people are already working 40, 50 hours a week, sometimes more. And now you're going to ask them to do this ERP implementation on top of it. It's just, you're really setting people up for burnout and failure. And that's
mm,
part of why you get the resistance as well, because they're so burned out and so overworked that they don't have the capacity to get excited about the new processes and the new business opportunities for doing the ERP implementation. I would highly recommend to an organization to pick your key users, your SMEs, your subject matter experts, and then start offloading some of their work before the project starts, because they obviously have to keep doing part of their existing job. It's not like you're going to free up your whole team to do this, but start offloading different pieces of their work so they have some bandwidth and capacity to take on the work of the ERP project. Because if your people aren't involved, your implementation is going to struggle. It doesn't matter how good your implementation partner is, because your implementation partner does not know your business the way you do, period.
mm.
We know the system, we know best practices, we know how things, air quotes, should work, but you know your business and you're going to own it. So make sure you give your people some bandwidth to actually do the process with you and with a partner.
What are typical, I think, roles on company side that you need to work with, and how they yeah, have a different look on the project?
You need to make sure that both sides, your implementation partner and the customer, has a strong PM, project manager.
Hmm.
The project managers have to really be in alignment, and there cannot be any ego or any guarded, like I'm going to hide information type mentality. It's okay to have risk on your RAID log. It's okay. You should have risks. I worked on projects before and we want to start notating potential risks. And the client will tell us, no, 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 we can't go to the board with any risks. And I'm like, do you realize what kind of exposure that is? By having a risk on your actual status sheet shows your leadership that you've identified potential risk and you've thought through how to mitigate the risk in the event that it happens. If you go to your board and they're upset that you have risks on there, there's like a cultural problem inside the organization. It's actually a good thing to have risks on your status reports because, again, it's showing them that you're thinking ahead. You're mitigating risk by anticipating potential risks so that you can think through how to fix those. On the project management side, that's why it's so important to be fully transparent, because we're humans and we make mistakes, and that's okay. But the finger pointing can't happen. You've got to go in and just be honest, say, hey, this happened. Now let's work together to fix it or to mitigate the risk. So the other thing too, on the D365 side, as a project manager, we know what we're doing, but we don't always know what's going on inside the organization. So it's important for the client's project manager to share with the D365 project manager other things that are going on in the business. It doesn't mean you have the D365 project manager has to know all the details, but it's good for the D365 project manager to know that these other projects are going on, or maybe some of the resources that are working on ERP are also working on other projects, which again is not highly desirable, but that does happen sometimes. But it's important that everyone's just very open and honest, and there's a lot of trust.
And other roles, I think C-level or IT, what is their role in this project?
The C-level it's really, really important that the C-level is in alignment and are excited about the project. Years ago, I worked on a project at a large company, and it didn't matter what was broken. It didn't matter if their printer didn't work or their email didn't work. Oh, the system's broken. And then they would run into the boss's office and be like, oh, the system's not working, the system's not working. And the reason they did that is because the manager didn't want the project. And so he would sit there and listen to them and not tell them that they needed to get in alignment and help things work together. And then one day something shifted. Somebody went and talked to that particular individual and said, hey, the system is here to stay. Own it. Let's make it work. The next time that someone went into that individual's office and started complaining, they told them, they're like, hey, you know what? This is our system. Let's own it. Let's make it the best we can make it. And immediately all the problems went away. Leadership sets the tone. So if you're in a C level, make sure that the level below you is fully supported, and make sure that your directors and your managers are fully supporting the team below them. Once people feel safe and they realize that they're doing all of this in the best interest of their customers, because again, people do ERP implementation so they can run their business better, so they can service their customers better. So I would say always keep the end customer in mind and make sure that everyone's in alignment and understanding why they're doing this project and understanding the impact it's going to have on their end customers. Because now they're believing in something bigger than themselves. They're seeing the big picture. And once that happens, which again is done by the leadership, once that happens, you're going to see an entirely different project, an entirely different implementation, and it'll actually be fun for the users.
That's cool. I think a little bit about the thing, how we can call it. I think a shared transformation vision. I call it so. How important is to have, a vision of the transformation, and that it's also shared with the, I think with the company or with the employees there are involved, and how can it look?
Sometimes people think if they do an ERP implementation, it's going to magically fix everything in their business. And that's just not reality. You have, as a leader, so if you're in that C suite, you need to take a look at your business and say, where do I want to go? And once you understand where you want to go, then you start saying, do I have all the elements to get there? Because it could be a cultural problem. Just like, say, for example, if a particular company has a cultural issue around conflict, and they're always having conflict. Well, hiring a conflict coach to come in and do a 2-day workshop is not going to fix it. Right? Sometimes people think, oh, if I pay enough money and I get the right person here, it's going to magically fix it. You have to go to the root cause. You have to understand why you're having the issues you're having, then bring in the right people, bring in the right software, bring in the right tools to fix your business. ERP is a tool. It's not going to fix all your issues. So I would suggest if you are a leader in a company, figure out who you are as a company. Are there any internal issues that need to be resolved? Find out as a company who you want to become, then go find a partner to help you get there.
Yeah, I see often the people in the companies they there it's a communication gap, I will
Yeah.
say, and the people they get mental sick. They have to go to a mental asylum or so. Um, what's your tip? How organizations better bridge the communication gap between business and technology teams?
It's getting in a room together. Your CIO, your CFO, your COO, they need to get in a room together. They need to make sure that they are in alignment, because as an organization, you may have a CIO that's saying, "Hey, we need to go this particular path," but then you may have a CFO that has an entirely different vision, or a COO that has an entirely different vision. And a lot of times, because everybody's so busy and there's just kind of life gets in the way, these individuals don't necessarily get in a room and talk all the time. And so you'll see them kind of pushing and pulling against each other. And sometimes there's a lot of conflict amongst the circle. So it's important if they get in a room together and they have a conversation and they have a vision board saying, who are we becoming? And then talk about how you're going to get there. But they need to be in alignment first. If they're in alignment, then you're going to see so much more progress and success. So, just to give you a story, I worked on a project one time with a very large company, and we were working with the IT team. Yeah, when we started working with them, we talked to the IT director, and he said, "This is an IT project, and we're going to push it onto the business." I immediately, red flags started like flying up all over my head. And their mentality is that sales order processing, invoicing, all these different components, inventory management was going to be an IT function. So it was an IT solution to a business problem, and they were going to tell the business how to do it. Well, needless to say, I went to my partner at the time, and I'm like, this has got failure written all over it. And the other thing that they also did is they said, because this is an IT project, we're not going to do any kind of solution verification at the beginning. We're just going to start picking away at stuff and we'll eventually get it all done. Well, they worked on this project. We were probably the second or third partner they pulled in on this particular project. And they had been working on this air quote IT project for 5 years. I can't even imagine how many millions of dollars they had. Long story short, we went in and we told them, like, before you start, you have to do a solution verification. You have to know where you're going. We have to document these processes. Otherwise, you're never going to go anywhere. And that's what ended up happening. The leadership in the business said, we've already spent X number of millions of dollars. And until you actually change how you're going to do the project, we're shutting it down. So it's so important because, again, the CIO, the CFO did not get in a room together and have a collaborative conversation about where they wanted to take the business. And it failed. We actually pulled out. We were like, we can't, this has got failure written all over it. So we actually pulled out of the project. So that's what has to happen. There has to be internal alignment before you can have external success.
Awesome. You have these international experience with the 14 countries. So I like it a little bit to ask what challenges come with global ERP projects.
Depends on what country you're working in. So if you're working in Latin America versus Europe, it's very different from a cultural perspective and on the timing of things. Years ago, when I first started working in Latin America, I remember I was working on a project in El Salvador, and being an American, we're typically very prompt. So I would usually get there a little bit early to the meetings. I would try to make sure it's fully prepared. So whenever everyone got in the room, we would start the project, right? Start the conversation. And I remember I showed up and no one was there. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in the wrong room. So I sat there for like 10 or 15 minutes and again, no one came. And I'm like, okay, what's wrong? So I actually got up and started asking someone, like, hey, am I in the right room? And they're like, oh, yeah, 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 they'll come. And I was like, okay. And so I sat there, and sure enough, in about an hour, people started trickling in. And I was just like, okay. And then I noticed that happened quite frequently. So this whole concept of time, I think, is perceived differently in different cultures. I remember I also worked on a project in Puerto Rico, and everything was urgent, 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 urgent. And so you would be like, okay, and I get it done and I give it to them. And then they would literally sit on it for like a year or 2 years. And so it's this mentality of everything's urgent, but then there's no action lots of times. And I don't mean that in negative context. I mean that in the sense of knowing, being an American, thinking a certain way, and then going to these different countries in learning how they think. So I just had to get myself in alignment with what they did. And then once I did, then I understood how things flowed, and then everything was good. So I'm not saying that one culture is good and one culture is bad. It's just different. So learning how to work inside of that. I also one time worked on a project in Turkey, and I remember no one wanted to make a decision because for me, again, my mindset is you do a risk reward value add analysis, you look at your options and you pick one and then you do it. For me,
Yeah.
it's kind of cut and dry. You do the analytics and you then pick the path of highest success probability. And when I was in Turkey working on this project, I kept on doing that. I'd provide them with these options and I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? And no one would make a decision. And I was like, oh, okay. So literally, you would do this probably like 5 or 6 meetings later, and then someone would finally make a decision. So it's that thought process of learning how they analyze data differently or how they go about making decisions differently. I've worked on projects in Europe as well, and the their their mindset is more similar to probably what I'm used to. But again, it's more of a collaborative type approach to business than some of the other cultures that I've worked in. I've also worked in the UK. Um, and going through the process of things is a little bit different. It's very similar in a lot of ways. But really, for me as a consultant, it's making sure that I get in alignment with them. I don't look at them and say, hey, you need to get in alignment with me. It's their
Okay.
business. So I'm there to bridge the gap and to try to make sure things move along. And then I work with it's within the parameters of what their culture and their business is. So there are differences, but I think it's going into it with an open mind and loose hands, meaning I'm not going to go in there and white knuckle or get all bent out of shape because I don't do something the way that I do. I start getting curious and asking questions, and then I adapt accordingly.
And how different are the finance processes between regions?
So it depends on what country you're in. So, like in France and China, they actually have statutory chart of accounts. Also, they do IFRS, International Financial Standards reporting. In the US, we have GAAP, General Acceptable Accounting Practices. So they're very similar. Their reporting's a bit different. Sometimes their chart of accounts are a bit different. You'll notice there's some other kind of posting differences on how where things sit on the trial balance. Whenever you look at some of the financial reporting for some countries, like in the United States, when you look at a trial balance, for example, it goes from the most liquid asset to the least liquid asset. And then in some countries, that's flip flopped. So the finance piece of it is different, but similar in many ways. So setting up the posting profiles and different things inside of E365 is somewhat similar, but I always ask the questions because I'll come at it from the approach of what I think it should be based upon my experience. And then I obviously lead on the client for verification for that whatever country they happen to be in.
Awesome. I think a little bit about the importance of localization in Dynamics deployment.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you see this?
Microsoft has done a lot to get the localizations expanded across more countries. So, like in the United States, we do not do e invoicing. E invoicing is the rest of the world type functionality. So, e invoicing is whenever you send a customer invoice to a customer, it actually has to go through that local government to get registered with a token before it actually gets sent to the customer to ensure that you, the company, actually pay the correct amount of tax or value added tax to that government. So there's localizations around that piece of it. There's some other localizations again around the chart of accounts, for example. VAT or value added tax is significantly different than US sales tax.
Mm.
Just to give you an idea, in the United States, we have about 15,000 tax codes. In the rest of the world, you have like six. ballpark. So you have standard, reduced, zero rated, and some special ones. So tax is significantly different. So Microsoft is doing a good job in expanding that footprint, because also the other thing around tax is you have value added tax on transfer orders, purchase orders, sales orders, and some different things, which we don't typically do, like tax in the United States on transfer orders. I mean, you can, there's some certain rules around it. But the localizations, Microsoft's continually expanding that particular footprint. There are still some gaps in D365 for some countries, but Microsoft is expanding that footprint pretty steadily.
That's, I think, why tax advisor earns so much in the US.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot to it.
um, what have you learned from all your international projects, especially what teaches you in leadership?
From a leadership perspective, I think it's to, again, make sure that there's clarity and alignment with where the company wants to go. I recently talked to a publishing company in the UK, and they're a global type company, or it's a publishing company, and understanding what's important to them is key. So I think the same human elements are pretty much the same across countries, in the sense of the CFO and the CIO and the COO and the C-suite need to be in alignment with each other. I mean, that's true regardless what country you're going into, but understanding what kind of nuances are related to their particular countries is important. So I worked on another project. It was a life science company, and we expanded them into 8 different countries. So just understanding how the companies across the different countries interact with each other, because lots of times you'll do intercompany transactions. And so if I'm maybe making a product in the Netherlands and I'm sending it to Germany, for example, or I'm sending it to France, or I'm sending it to the UK, or I'm sending it to Asia, that intercompany transaction can attract different types of requirements, like certificates of compliance. And there's different kinds of things that are associated with each one of those countries. So it's really important to understand how that fits together. From a leadership perspective, though, a lot of the companies I've worked with are in Europe or just somewhere else like Canada or somewhere else in the world, but they will also have a US footprint. So it's important to make sure that we understand from the implementation perspective how the companies are going to run differently versus US versus, compared to some other country, or how they're going to be similar. And again, that comes into leadership. Leadership has to talk to each other across these different countries so that they have a big vision of where their business is going to go, so that they can service their clients better.
Yeah, actually, I think we put in every product we have the word AI ERP, Dynamics Copilot, so it's really the same. What does it actually mean in practice?
So Copilot is your companion or your buddy or your friend largely. So there are independent agents. So let's kind of break this down into two separate buckets. There's Copilot, which is going to help you do things. So let's talk about the supplier agent inside of D365 Finance and Supply Chain. The supplier agent inside of D365 actually has two different components to it. They're both AI, but one's a agentic component to it, and another one is just more of like an informative piece to it. So the AI part of it that's informative allows you to go through, and it reads through all of your purchase orders to say, hey, when is this purchase order going to be late, for example? And you set this up in your query, so you could say, show me all purchase orders that are supposed to be delivered on Friday that haven't that I want to follow up with the vendor. So you want to be proactive. So today is Thursday, and so we want to make sure that everything's going to get delivered tomorrow, just as an example. So you can set up this AI agent of sorts to go through and read through all your purchase orders to see what should be delivered, and then email your vendor, say, hey, is this going to be delivered tomorrow, just as an example. Or if you're being retroactive, you could say, show me everything that was supposed to have been delivered on Monday that hasn't been delivered yet, and send an email to that particular vendor. So D365 on the agent side will actually read through all your purchase orders based on that criteria, draft an email for you to that vendor. So you have two options. It'll draft the email so you, the human, can go through and look at it, tweak it, change the verbiage, whatever you want to in it, and then send it. Or you could tell the agent component of it to actually draft the email and automatically send it. So again, it's doing work that I would manually have to do for me. So it's surfacing all that information. It's combing through the data, it's surfacing that so that me, the human, can then look at it and say, yep, that needs to go. And then once I'm comfortable with it and I get used to how the system works, I could have it go automatically. So there's also, so everybody's talking about MCP, right? So MCP is allows you to go out and kind of do what a human does, but you can do it from like Teams, for example. So if I wanted to put in a purchase order, I could go into Teams and say, create a purchase order for this particular, the vendor for this particular item, and the system will go generate that data for me. It's a tool. AI is a tool and it's very powerful. But from what we're seeing is people are coming up to us and saying, how can I use the AI to get information out of the system? And then how can I use AI to, once I look at something, to tell it to update the system? So there's not a lot of autonomous agents being implemented yet, at least not from what I've seen. But we are starting to leverage AI a lot as a tool to
Mhm.
surface data. So I'm not having to go manually look for information. I can give it a human language, a large language model, LLM command, and let it go to the database and get that information and send back to me.
And what's with the topic, I think, about governance?
Mhm.
What are the risk of implementation these co-pilots AI without strong governance?
So I think it depends on what industry you're in. So I think
Mhm.
the governances can be a little bit looser for some industries versus others. But again, the way D365 is configured, whenever you're using MCP, for example, or you're using AI, it looks at your security permissions. So D365 has role-based security permissions. So it's looking at Alicia's permissions to say, does Alicia have permissions to see or to write to this data or to this table? So it's fully governed. So if I'm in Teams and I'm actually telling the system create a purchase order in D365 using a command prompt in Teams, it's looking at my Alicia's roles to say, does Alicia have permissions to do this? So it is fully governed inside of the Microsoft umbrella of those different pieces. But you do have the capacity to pull in external resources from like SharePoint files or other external applications. And then that's where governance could get a little bit more tricky. But inside the Microsoft umbrella, as far as D365 goes, when I'm using AI to pull data or to push data into the application, it is fully governed by my security role.
And what do you think? Will AI reduce ERP complexity or actually increase it?
I think it's going to shift it. So before we had a lot of human effort going out, mining data and looking out again, like just like with a supplier agent, a person would go run a report to say, show me everything that was supposed to be delivered on Friday. And then they would have to go through there and manually send an email to those 20 different vendors that have product that should have been delivered or is going to be delivered. So by the system doing that, now me, the user, is streamlining my processes. I'm still gathering the same information, but the system's actually gathering the data for me. So it's freeing up my time so I can do other tasks. So I don't necessarily see it getting rid of people. I mean, there's some capacities, like if a person's job is simply to sit there to mine data out of the system and do kind of repetitive work, it could be replaced by AI. There is going to be some of that. But I think we're going to see that this AI is going to free people up so that they can make more decisions and do more with the information that they have. So I think it's going to be a shift of work, not necessarily an elimination of work, even though there will be some elimination of work depending on the role.
Yeah. And when you say, I have looked into a little bit into dynamics, and there are so cool AI things. I think I really love this predictive forecasting. What's your favorite thing in dynamics?
You know, I think the supplier agent is pretty cool actually, because I think it really takes a lot of work out of doing that follow up and that form of communication. Demand planning does have a lot of really good analytics and Copilot functionality, AI functionality inside of it. The other thing where AI is really going to start taking off, I think, is leveraging the data in the data lake. It's for like Power BI type information. So if you have multiple data sources and you pull it into a data warehouse like data lake or something like that, you're going to be able, you can do like anomaly type AI analysis on it. You could have it look at the data and make decisions on it and propose certain activities. So I think that it's the footprint. So Microsoft's actually doing this whole thing with Copilot where I forgot what it's called. It's called iWork, I think. I think it's called iWork. I may have that wrong. But anyway, but it's going to be Copilot that reaches across Word, Outlook, Excel,
Mm,
Teams, D365, because it could be that I got an email from a vendor, right? They emailed me and I can't remember where it came from. Like, oh, gee, I know Bob emailed me about that, but where is it? So the Copilot's actually going to reach across all of your applications, your Microsoft applications, and pull that information. So when I query on something, it's not just looking at D365, it's actually combing through my Teams chats and through Outlook and those different components. So I think it's really about servicing data in a meaningful way so you can make better decisions.
awesome. Well, yeah, in every podcast, I do a rapid fire round. I ask a short question, and you say what comes in your mind. So, the biggest ERP myth, the biggest ERP myth.
The biggest ERP move? Is that what you
Uh,
said?
myth. I pronounce it. Myth. The Mythbusters. What should they do? The about ERP. What should they? Yeah, look like when it's about topics. What do the people think wrong or say wrong?
So when people think about ERP, what is the thing that they think about that might not be correct? That's
Mm, yeah.
so when people think about ERP, I think lots of times they think that it's going to fix everything, that somehow it's going to fix issue things inside of their business that ERP is not intended to fix. So
Mm,
ERP again has a huge impact on the culture of the business. ERP has a huge impact on how your business
mm,
processes run. But again, it's a tool. So it depends on how you leverage the tool to get the desired outcomes.
mm. One thing every CFO should prioritize now.
Prioritize what you want your business to look like in 5 years.
Oh, that's also interesting. Uh, what skill future consultants need?
Say that again.
What is the yeah? What one skill consultants need in the future?
The main skill that people need for the future is to be flexible. Understand AI, understand the things that are changing in our world, and don't resist the resistance. But don't blindly accept everything. That's not what I mean by that. What I mean is get curious about what and how you can leverage the tools like AI that are coming out to actually increase the quality of life for your clients and how you can deliver product to your clients.
One Microsoft technology more people should learn.
I think that one of the things that people should learn inside of Microsoft is really how the whole ecosystem can work together.
Mm,
Microsoft does not work in a silo. It did before, like in the past, but Microsoft is really connecting all of its different components together. So whenever you think about Microsoft, don't think about ERP somehow being independent from your other Microsoft applications. Think about it as a holistic system. So I think it would really the skill people need to do is like mind shift a bit and start thinking how the Microsoft ecosystem actually works together.
Coffee, tea, or energy drink during go live?
Say it again.
Coffee, tea, or energy drink during go
Oh,
live?
coffee, tea, or energy drink. For me, it's probably coffee.
Okay. And what was the best career advice you ever received?
The best career advice I ever received was to stretch myself. When an opportunity comes up, don't feel like you don't have the skills to do it. Grow into it.
Mm.
There's always good on the other side of hard. And that does not mean fake it till you make it. I am not a believer in a fake it till you make it mentality. I believe that whenever someone gives you an opportunity, you learn the skills that you need to actually accomplish it and to do it well and get curious. No one expects you to have all the answers. Figure
Mm.
out what you need and ask questions and learn from other people. That was the best career advice I ever got.
Awesome. And is there any upcoming speaking event, podcast, or project you like to, yeah, mention?
Yeah, so we just came out of Dynamics Con, so I had three different speaking events there, and then this fall I'll be speaking at Microsoft Summit in Nashville, Tennessee. So super excited about that.
Awesome. So then my last question is, when the people should think, or one information should take from this session, what should it be?
Be comfortable being uncomfortable. So as you're going through your career, whether you're implementing an ERP implementation or you're just in life for personal growth, the best advice that I can give you and what I want you to walk away with is learn how to mind shift. Learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable because on the other side of that is so much joy and so much success. So stretch yourself. Learn how to network and surround yourselves by people that you want to become like.
Yeah. So Alicia, thank you so much for joining the MC65 podcast. This was an incredible, insightful conversation around ERP modernization, Dynamics 365 finance, AI, executive leadership, and the future of enterprise transformation. So thank you so much for being here. This was really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye. Have a good day.